Hello and welcome to this webinar with the question, is effortless change really possible? And that's what we'll be exploring today with guest host Julie Mitchell. I'll just say a little bit about me and the purpose of this webinar. So I'm Sarah Sanderson and I run a Facebook group called Tea and Insights, which is all about exploring what and who we are and how this wondrous human experience works. And every so often I will invite a guest host on to talk about around a particular topic to help with this kind of exploration of what is going on, what is life all about, and can life actually be simple? Do we overcomplicate it? And what I've found in my own experience is, yes, it is simple, and yes, we do overcomplicate it. And by being in these types of conversations and the exploration that goes on in the Tea and Insights group, we get to kind of unpick a little bit of that and start to see through some of the illusions that we have and start to really simplify life. So today, like I said, it's all about Julie and her journey with this inside out understanding, which is kind of like the foundation piece of what I share in Tea and Insights. It's also known as the Three Principles, which was founded by Sydney Banks. And what I'll do for the recording is I'll make sure there's a link to some information about the Three Principles as well, because that's a lot of what we might be covering today in terms of how this understanding has, just sort of transformed Julie's outlook on life, but I will let her explain all. So Julie, if you'd like to just say a little bit about yourself, whatever comes to you to share, and then we'll just start. Over to you.
Fab. Hello, good morning. It's so lovely to get the opportunity to do this and to have this conversation. And in sort of thinking about doing this today, it's given me a really good chance to think about how much has changed for me in the last just over 6 months, I think, 6 or 7 months. So I'm a mum of 2 boys. I'm married to Andy, and at the time when I first met you, Sarah, I was running a business. And the thing that led me, I think, to first contact you was that I'd followed my friend Liz into the Tea and Insights group. And Liz is a good friend of yours, so I kind of felt that I was in safe hands, because I knew if you and Liz were friends, then you were probably a safe bet. And if I'm honest, at that time I didn't really know what Tea and Insights was about, and my interest in it, and the reason that I then went on to contact you after joining the group, was that I'd reached a stage in my life where I felt trapped. And trapped, a bit lost, didn't really know where I was going next. And I was really confused by that. I didn't get it, because I felt that I was in a place in my life where I was very grateful for everything that I had. I was somebody who'd always been able to kind of spot opportunities, I felt, and that I wasn't sort of scared of taking a risk. I'd done different things with my career. And yet I was frustrated and feeling impatient with my kids, and I didn't think that the relationship with Andy and I was going particularly well, and just a general sense of who am I and where am I going and what's it about. So yeah, quite trapped. And I can look back now already and see that I was trapped by my own thinking, but at that point I had no idea I was trapped by my life. I'm trapped by this business I've set up, I'm trapped by my family, I'm trapped by middle age, I'm trapped by everybody and everything that I know. Even though I love them all and appreciate them all, and I know I've got a good life, I know I'm really lucky, And on the surface of it, I think, you know, people would have looked at my life and then thought it was completely sorted, and I was completely sorted, and I did not feel like that at all. And I didn't know what to do. So I think in joining the group and starting to see the conversations that were happening, and then in contacting you, I was searching for a way out of that feeling, but I didn't know what I was looking for. Just not to feel like that. So just to kind of take a step back a little bit, I'd spent quite a long time in my career working in higher education, and I'd had some great opportunities within that and really enjoyed that work. But I'd sort of, after 18 years, I felt that I was, I suppose, limited and a bit restricted by what I could do with that. I felt like I couldn't fully be myself. And so when the opportunity came up for me to do something different, I decided to set up a business that was completely different from anything that I'd done before. And it started when Andy and I got married. So we'd had kind of a do-it-yourself vintage style wedding, and we'd collected loads of china for that wedding and had a tea party, and it was great fun. And not long after that, I'd been on maternity leave with my youngest son, Will, who's now 6. And I sort of spent a lot of time, you know, at home with him and feeding him, sat on the sofa. And I've been thinking, what was I going to do with all this vintage china that we'd collected? And so I thought I'd set up a business, obviously. And so I developed a website, and the intention was only ever to rent out the vintage china. That's all it was ever going to be. And before I knew it, we were running a pop-up tea party catering business. And then I went back to work after maternity leave, but was still trying to do that as well, which wasn't always that easy. So when the opportunity came up when Will was 3, I think, my husband Andy had been retraining as a radiographer, and so his training had come to an end. He got a full-time job, and that meant that I had got sort of more options. We were better off financially, so it meant that I'd got options to leave the higher education job and take the business forward. And that's what I did. And a year later, Will started school, and I was passing a local shop that had become empty. And very, very randomly, for a woman who had no thoughts of opening up a tea room, who was running this catering business, I followed a whim and went into this shop, this local shop, and went to have a look with a potential view to opening a tea room. Where did that come from? Came home that night having looked and could sort of see this idea working, and said to Andy, that's what we're going to do, we're going to open a tea room. And he was like, right, okay, is that what we want to do? And at the time it really did feel like it was. And opened up the tea room and ran that for 18 months, and was still doing the catering, catered lots of weddings and things, and had a great adventure with it. It was great fun, and also completely too much to do whilst having a family and Andy working full time, and I was just exhausted by the time we got 18 months through that process. So all that had happened sort of before last summer. So I'd then closed the tea room because I was just like, this is not working for me at all. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? I'll do the catering. I'll carry on doing the catering. And then we had a really busy summer with the catering. And by the end of it, the only thing I knew was I didn't want to do it anymore, which kind of left me a little bit, well, so now what? And the other thing that had added to my kind of confusion with how I was feeling was that I tied a lot of thinking up in the fact that I'd been so busy running that business that maybe that's what was making me feel unhappy and feel overwhelmed, and that was trapping me really. And so when I closed the shop and started to see that I didn't want to do much of the business anymore, I felt that that would be the solution, and that everything would just slot back into place, and the next opportunity would come along, and it would all be fine. And I was fine. And then I started to realize, the more time, sort of distance that I had from it, that I didn't feel fine at all. And that's where I think I remember sending you a message. I think it was saying, what can you do for me? what can you offer me that will basically help me to work through this and be better? And that's what I thought our relationship would be. I thought you would come along with your bag of tools and techniques, and you would say, well, try this and try that and do that, and that we would look at all the different opportunities that were available in front of me, and I'd pick one of them, and then I'd be on my way, and it would have been lovely. And something really quite different happened. Really quite different, and something that I would never have set out to look for, and that has completely transformed my life. So, do you want me to just carry on, or do you want to interject? What's your preference?
You're doing brilliantly, Julie. I'm I'm really absorbed. So you carry on.
Just tell me if I'm going off on too many tangents. Just pull me back if you need to.
Okay, will do.
So, in some of our first conversations, and I think at that time I signed up to a short course that you ran for the first time, and again, I thought that course was about discovering what I wanted to do, what creative outlet was I going to pursue that would be my next move. And so when we started talking about thought and mind and consciousness, I was open to it, but I think I had quite fixed ideas about it. I didn't think I'd got fixed ideas about it, but I had. And having worked in roles where I'd mentored people before, and having been a bit of a self-help book addict in my younger years, I felt that I knew what those things meant. And I'd been in conversations with people before where I talked to people about the fact that you can't control what anybody else thinks and what anybody else does, but you can control what you think and how you behave. And I think that thought of being able to control things is part of what had added to my feeling out of control and feeling as if I wasn't doing it right, because I felt like I should be able to control it. I get this stuff, I know how it works, why can't I control it? So when we started talking about the first thing that made a massive difference to me was when we talked about thought, and the very idea that personal thought wasn't always true, that all of these thoughts come in and out of our minds, and it's not always true. And I'm laughing because, of course, that's so obvious. Of course it isn't. I had many examples of my own where I could see that was the case. And yet that penny had never dropped with me at all. It was, I should be able to control my thoughts, and I should be able to do something with those thoughts to direct my behavior. So when that realization kind of hit me, okay, not everything that I think is true. Not everything I think is necessarily helpful. And instantly, everything for me changed in the way that I thought about myself, because I realized I was telling myself stories through this thinking that weren't necessarily true. They were just kind of a running commentary that that had been going on for a long time that I was completely buying into. And I was also doing that with my relationships as well. And Andy and I had gone through quite a tough time, and I, put my hands up now. I mainly felt it was his fault, and obviously he didn't. He mainly thought it was all my fault, and but my reason for thinking it was mainly his fault was because I thought I was a much better communicator, and I completely judged him in terms of his ability to communicate. And what I see now is that that was my story, and that worked for me. I liked that because it made me right and it made me better. And there's no wonder we were falling out all the time with that going. But when I realised that that's what I'd been doing, and that those thoughts weren't necessarily true, it wasn't telling me the truth, it was just my version of the truth, I stopped buying into them. And they still came, the thoughts still came, and sometimes the thoughts came in so quickly I didn't even realise they were there, and I'd act on them. But at other times I'd sort of take a step back and think, yeah, that's not necessarily true, and it made a huge difference. So that was the first kind of major change. And at that point I was relieved to have discovered that, because it shifted lots of things in the way that I felt. But then a new sort of frustration came in, because although I was calmer and more at peace, I still didn't know what I was going to do, sort of career-wise. And then I suppose I went down a bit of a train of thought of, well, it's all very well Sarah sort of giving me this peace and calm and directing me to that, but that's not going to earn me the money, is it? That's not going to give me the career satisfaction. What's all that about? What am I doing? What's this for? And the course that I was doing with you at the time was a 4-week course, and that was coming to an end. And I didn't know really what to do with that, because I sort of felt, okay, well, this has made a massive shift in my life, and I'm really enjoying starting to explore the 3 principles which you'd introduced me to. But I was also, yes, there was some enjoyment, but I wasn't finding it comfortable. There were a lot of things that I was questioning, and sometimes I would see it and sometimes I wouldn't see it. And I at the times when I wouldn't see it, I doubted everything that I'd seen. And I would try and work that out. And I would try and figure it out. And the more I did that, the more shook up my thinking got, and the more I couldn't see clearly anything. And at those times, I was just like, well, this is it's clearly all rubbish, and it means nothing. And then I'd sort of fall out with it almost, and stop trying. Just like, well, I'm done with it. It's ridiculous. And then the thoughts would settle, because I wasn't trying to work it out and fix it. And then I'd see it again, and then I'd be happy again and at peace again, and like, oh yeah, what was I doing then, not believing it? How ridiculous was I? So I was kind of in this state of going between the two, and that still happens sometimes, much less frequently, but yeah, occasionally that does still happen. So we'd got to the end of that 4-week course, and I had got into a what is all this about and what am I doing again, and got really tied up with that. And at that time you had started to put together a mastermind course, and it was the obvious thing for me to do next, because we'd worked together and started exploring, and there was more to explore. And yet I had gone into this, I'm not buying it. I'm not buying it at the minute, not buying into it. And at that point, we've had this conversation before, so I know this won't be a surprise to you, but I started to question the spiritual side of it. I've always been very comfortable with my atheist label, and therefore I was really quite put about with the level of spirituality that was being discussed in a lot of the things I was listening to. And again, that the story that came from that in my thinking was, this is not for me, because I don't believe in this stuff. I'm an atheist, it's not for me. And because of that, I then felt that maybe, the way that everybody was talking about it, using very similar language and pointing to Sydney Banks, the pinnacle of the three principles, this Jesus-like figure who had got these followers, and you had clearly bought into this and were one of these followers. So maybe actually you were dragging me into a cult. This was my thinking. And I didn't fully buy into that, because you're good friends with my friend Liz, and I don't think Liz would be dragged into a cult. So I was surprised that you and she were such good friends. So again, I was a little bit sort of I don't know what to trust. I'm not sure what to trust here, and eventually I just couldn't resist joining the mastermind, because regardless of the spiritual side of it, which I thought at that point, I'm just going to ignore that and pretend it's not there. Let's just pretend none of that exists, and focus on this thing around thought that's really helping me. And so I signed up to the mastermind, and yeah, it changed everything really. And now I'm still hanging on to the atheist label. I'm still quite comfortable with that, but I kind of consider myself to be a very grounded spiritual atheist, if such a thing could exist. Maybe there's a book around that needs to be written. But in doing that, I think I opened up to the opportunity of possibility, really. Possibility in what I believed, and possibility in terms of what I could do. And I felt, as I said before, I felt that I was somebody who could spot an opportunity and take an opportunity, and was quite daring and not afraid to try things. And therefore, it completely surprised me that there was a whole load of stuff that I had told myself I couldn't do, because that's not who I thought I was. So I'd never considered that there were things that maybe I wanted to do that I wasn't allowing myself to do, because I wasn't the sort of person who would do that. So, for example, I love writing, and I've written a personal blog for years now. I never thought I could be a person who would write a book or could earn a living from writing. That wasn't who I was. I haven't got the English degree, and I've not got the training, and I've not had a career in writing, and people like me don't write. Which people do write, I'm not sure who I thought they were, but I just knew it wasn't me. And so I think at that time, whilst I was starting to recognise that was what I was doing, I was still feeling quite uncomfortable with leaving my old business behind, because that felt like something that I knew, something that I was good at, something that my ego had received praise for and liked to have. It was sort of something that I held on to, I think, to make myself feel good. That's what I felt at the time. And so I tried to pull that old business into something that fitted more with where I was at. And I've been really into the idea of slow living for quite a long time. And therefore I thought, okay, I can keep doing the events, but I'll do slow living events, and very sort of grounded in nature and around mindfulness and around being present. So I was sort of trying to pull together all the different aspects of my life at that point. I guess I was thinking, you know, I'm interested in the slow living, I know how to run events, and the 3 principles is working for me at this level that I'm delving in, and we can pull those together and make that something. And I think at that point I really believed that I would pursue that, but I wasn't feeling it. I just wasn't feeling it. And the main thing that I felt at that time was tired. I was shattered from doing the old business. I think in many of our calls during that mastermind, I would talk about being so tired and having no energy. And when we got to talking about following inclination, I think that allowed me to give in to that feeling of exhaustion and tiredness and follow the inclination to rest. And that's what I did. And there were moments at that point where I felt that maybe I'd never get started again, because I thought, you know, give myself a few weeks off and I'll be back on track. But actually what I really needed to do was just give myself a break. And that's what I did. And from that, I just became so much clearer about trusting myself and trusting my own wisdom, my intuition, my gut feeling, whatever you want to call it, whatever it is for you. For me, it was just about trusting myself. And at this point, I had completely embraced the idea that I was well, and that I did not need fixing, and I did not need to find answers. And it was okay sometimes if I lost sight of that fact or followed my thoughts into behavior that I didn't particularly like, because I knew I would come back to this place of calm and just being. And sort of thinking about it now, that time was a little unnerving sometimes, because, as I say, I didn't know if I'd get started again. But I look back at it and my mind was more empty than it's ever been. That was so lovely. It was so lovely. I was chilled out and relaxed and just going with what came along. And then somehow between then and now, perhaps say the last couple of months, things have just started to happen that I don't feel like I've been trying to do, which sounds weird. And I am completely moving into lots of different areas of work and exploring lots of different things that I want to do without feeling like I am working, and without feeling like I have really tried to come up with an answer, because that's not been what I've been doing. I've trusted myself to follow an inclination to do something, and then to see what happens after that. And loads of great things are happening.
I'm just going to butt in to just say that, yeah, during the mastermind, that period when you actually kind of like stopped trying to make something work that you thought was the thing to do, because it made it, it kind of like, oh yeah, like you were saying, you were pulling these different threads together with the slow living and your catering experience, and then all of a sudden you're just like, actually, I don't want to, maybe I will do that at some point, but that's not the thing. And you kind of just gave yourself permission just to, no, I don't want to do anything right now. What I noticed during the mastermind is lots of seeds were planted, because there was the collaboration, the idea to collaborate with Liz was born in that time. You didn't know exactly where it would go, and that was I think another brilliant thing about it was letting go of expectations. It's like, oh, it's all right just to have this, to have an idea and not know where it's going to go, and just see what happens. And also you started sharing, I think you had a coffee morning with other mums. You kind of share, you know, go to different people's houses, and they were noticing things about your life. You were sharing, you were just basically being yourself and sharing what you were seeing, and they were getting a lot out of it. And again, it's like all these little seeds were being planted about you know, coaching and things like that. Not that you had that idea of being a coach at that stage, because you were basically being yourself, and all of these things were happening. And of course, when that goes on, it's because it's effortless. We don't always notice at the time that anything's happening. So I just wanted to interject that, you know, a lot of seeds were planted during that time of rest, but you didn't know. It's like you didn't notice because it didn't feel like you were doing anything. So anyway, carry on.
In a sense, just to kind of respond to that, I think in a sense I couldn't see that anything was happening at all. I just felt like I wasn't doing anything, and there was some concern in me about that. But loads of things were happening, and as you were saying, in those conversations that I was having with friends, I remember going onto one of the mastermind calls and talking about the fact that I had no intention of talking to people about the three principles. And, you know, there was some thinking about people think I'm weird, and what's she talking about, and what is this, and all of that, and who does she think she is to be talking about this. But I was finding that this stuff was just coming out in conversations, and I couldn't help but talk about it because it had had such a positive impact on my life. And so, yeah, that stuff was happening. But just as is happening now, I don't see a lot of it happening because it's just happening without me feeling like I'm working to make it happen. And it sounds like such a strange thing, doesn't it? But yeah, letting go of expectation and just following what seems like the obvious next step and seeing where that leads, and then responding to that just changes the whole thing. Instead of sort of sitting down and thinking, okay, I'm going to you know, when I look at my old business, in some ways it seemed like it was following an inclination to go and look at the shop and do that, and it sort of took on a life of its own. But there was very much about, okay, so what is this going to look like, and what is it going to be, and where are we going to fit into the market, and who are our competitors, and, you know, what's our longer term strategy, and all of that, which brought with it truckloads of stressful feelings and pressure, and because of the way I was thinking about it. Whereas now I sometimes feel that my thoughts go to a place where I think, okay, so if I do this, what will that lead me to? And I go, well, we don't know, because the next step could bring anything. So I might take any direction after the next step. So trying to predict all these possible outcomes is absolutely pointless, because I'm just making stuff up, and, you know, it's not rooted in any reality until I do the next thing, and then I know what the reality is, and that will give me options to follow at that point. So that's as much as I get into planning or thinking or doing in that sense. But yeah, the seeds that were planted during that mastermind and the conversations that were happening, and during that time of rest, were really interesting, because we'd have our mastermind calls. So there were 6 of us. So on those calls, there'd be anything between 3 and 6 of us, you know, speaking about our week and sort of what we'd explored and what our insights had been, which was amazing because we learned so much from each other, and it was just wonderful. But what was particularly interesting, I think, was that we would often speak about or respond to what other people had spoken about. And in many ways, we were almost coaching ourselves and giving ourselves giving the advice that we needed ourselves. And that was quite interesting, and we spotted things in each other that seemed to others to be things that we had that we couldn't see, but we could see it in other people, if that makes any sense. So when I sort of started getting this feeling that wouldn't go away, I was having these conversations with people where I was talking about the 3 principles. I was, you know, aware of how much it had impacted positively on my life, and I started to feel that I wanted to coach. And so I raised that in one of the calls, and it was met with some surprise that I'd not realised it before, because everybody thought that's where I was heading from the way that I was talking about it, but I'd not recognised it at all. And I went from there into a bit of a knot about, you know, how was I going to train to be a coach, and what qualification was I going to do to be a coach, and I wasn't qualified and I wasn't ready, and why did I think I could do it, and completely overlooking the fact that a lot of the work that I did in higher education when I worked within a university setting had been coaching and mentoring, and I completely ignored that because the job title wasn't coach or mentor, and I didn't have a certificate that said that I was qualified to do it. And so when everybody sort of said to me, but that's what you were, and that's what you are a coach, and you were a coach, and you've worked as a coach for a long time, it was a massive surprise to me, which I couldn't completely accept at first. And I thought, I'm either going to have to find a way to get qualified and do it, or I'm going to have to look for something else, you know, because I don't believe you can just be a coach. And yeah, all the time I was encountering more and more people who effectively I was kind of informally coaching. And I was also very drawn to the idea of I'd worked with young people in universities, and I wanted to be able to bring the 3 principles understanding to them. And that's the thing that kept rising up within me, I guess. It's hard to explain. It was different to what am I going to do. I didn't particularly want to pursue it because I didn't feel qualified to do it. And yet it was there and would not go away. And I didn't know how to do it, so I stopped thinking about it. And then opportunities have come up that have led me down that path without me trying to work out how to do it. So I started responding to friends who've got teenage children who were perhaps struggling with overwhelm or anxiety, and just offering to coach them because I wanted to, because, you know, these were my friends and their kids were struggling, and just started to do that really. And I've seen some great results, and it makes me get quite emotional because I feel that if I had this understanding when I was that age, and if I can give this understanding to my kids, and if I can pass this understanding on to anybody at a younger age, and that can help them be themselves and be comfortable being themselves and offer themselves to the world, how amazing is that, you know? And it feels like that way of connecting with people is kind of my purpose, and I'd never recognized that before, even though it had come out in different ways in different work that I was doing. Even with the tea room, you know, people would come in and spend the day there talking about their problems. And that's what it was, and that was the bit of that I loved. It was about creating community and about connecting with people. And to sort of have the opportunity to do that now is just incredible. And I didn't know that that's where I was heading for at all. And Liz, who we've talked about a lot, our friend Liz and I met in that university setting. We were working together, and all of a sudden it just seemed, I think I was cooking tea one night. I was cooking dinner. I was stirring a pan on the stove, and all of a sudden I thought, we could do something in universities. Liz and I could do something in universities. We know universities. We know where the where the struggle is for students and staff, and imagine what we could do with this understanding if we could take that into universities. And so we're now working on a project to try that out. We want to do a research project and collect some data and see whether it works in that setting. And I'm so excited by that. It's amazing. And so all this stuff is happening, and I don't feel like I'm working. And I'm starting slowly to earn money from it, but I don't feel concerned about the money in the same way. And that's perhaps easy to say when I have got a house and we've got clothes and we're fed and watered. But actually, what I've recognised throughout all of it is that there are very few things that we actually need as human beings. There are very few things that we need, and everything that we think we want are stories that we're telling ourselves. And that makes it really simple for me, because I need to look after myself and I need to look after my kids. And actually, beyond that, the other stuff is what I want to do and what I choose to do. And I package all that together, and I no longer feel trapped, because the only thing that was ever making me feel trapped was my own thinking. And now I know that's rubbish. I can do anything, and I can also do nothing if I don't want to. And it's as simple as that, and it doesn't matter. And that's where I'm at.
I love it. And then I just wanted to add to that piece about easy for you to say that you're not concerning yourself about the money, but one thing that this understanding really demonstrates, and for me, and I know anybody that kind of comes across it, is security is inbuilt. We are, we're already secure, we're already fulfilled, we're already, happiness is true happiness is what we are. So this idea that you get security from having a house, or you get security from having a certain amount in your bank account, it's just simply not true. And when you actually deeply recognize that and know the truth is that you are secure already, that the freedom in that is just, and the relief. There's nothing out there for me to get, there's nothing for me to search for, is just phenomenal. I just want to see if anyone's got a question for you. If anyone's got a question, if you want to unmute yourself, which is in the bottom left corner, then please do. No, you're obviously being very clear with what you're sharing, Julie, which is great. I've loved listening. I love listening to it. Is there anything else that you want to that's bubbling up to share?
One thing that came to mind, it was as you were talking about the freedom that you feel when you recognise there's nothing to achieve or nothing to gain. And something that's up there with those things in terms of being a game changer for me has been not taking things personally. Because as I look back over my life, I have taken everything personally, without realizing that that's what I was doing. And it's been quite a recent insight for me to see that that's what was happening, and that part of the reason that I feel so different about my relationships now with everyone and everything is that I don't take it personally. I know that, you know, the way that we function as human beings is the same for everybody, and therefore if somebody says something that would have previously offended me or hurt me, I see now where it's coming from, and I don't feel it as a personal slight. I just don't take it personally, and that's made a massive difference. The only other thing that I would like to say is to give a huge thank you to you, Sarah, because you have so gently, but it sounds quite contradictory, gently but forcefully, is that possible, guided me through my exploration so far, and it's been an absolute complete joy and pleasure to work with you and get to know you. And yeah, I just really value everything that you've provided and really appreciate that.
Oh, thank you, Julie, for saying that. Of course, it's yeah, I know that I've done my job well as a coach is, you know, when somebody has the insights for themselves, because we can't change we can't change anybody. Change happens via insight. When we see more, things just automatically change without us having to force or do anything. But I love creating environments where insights potentially may occur. But of course, like you say, you were stirring a pan and you had a and you had a kind of like aha moment. You know, they can happen anywhere. But what I've noticed is just being in this type of conversation, these transformational conversations, really does help to start to access your own wisdom, which is available to everybody. This kind of universal intelligence is available to everybody. And well, yeah, when you start to kind of trust yourself, listen to that inner guidance, it can make a huge difference. But the other piece I really love with the Inside Out understanding is, yes, not taking ourselves seriously, but also loving everything about our humanness, and not trying to fix or change our personality or trying to overcome something. It's like it's all okay, because we're fundamentally at our core well. You know, we have innate well-being already, so we don't have to try and fix anything or change anything. And when I deeply saw that, it freed up a lot of time, because I was very busy trying to fix myself. But how can you fix something that's made up? You know, it's our thinking that's telling us all of these different stories, and you might feel like you've maybe fixed one story, but then another one will come along. But when you realize, oh, they're all stories, it's all made up, and I'm actually okay just as I am. It's like, okay, I can now focus on what do I want to do? You know, what can I play with? So yeah, it's been, I love sharing this understanding with others, and other people seeing that for themselves. It's a joy for me, and I can completely see why you want to share it with particularly with young people, because we innately know it. I mean, I've got toddler twins who are 3, coming up to 3, and I can see the joy, the playfulness, and the fun, and the range of emotions that they go through, but don't hang on to them. You know, they can experience anger one minute, and then, you know, then they'll be laughing the next, and then, you know, you can really see the transient nature of the emotions that we have. So they're not fixed. They're not who we are. They're just things, you know, our thoughts and feelings just come and go. And you can really see that in very little people. But then as we get older, yeah, we start to buy into stories about ourselves and make certain emotions wrong and this type of thing. So being able to share with young people that, no, you're okay, and whatever you're feeling is okay, because it's transient. It's just thought in the moment, and it will come and it will go, and it will come and it will go. Yes, I think that's brilliant work that you're doing. So the other thing to share is that well, thanks to Julie. Julie suggested, why don't you run a mastermind again, Sarah? and because part of the mastermind that I ran the first time round, the first month of it involves being part of the Engage Space, which is run by 2 other Free Principles practitioners. And they're running that again in April. And that's why Julie suggested, why don't you run a mastermind again, because it worked so well last time to have the Engage Space for the first month, and then having a couple of months after that. So I am going to do that and see if there's any interest. So I will put a link to in the recording to details about the mastermind, and anybody that wants to have a conversation with me about it, just let me know. But yeah, I'm excited to offer it again and see if people are interested. Are there any questions before we finish about this effortless change, or anything that Julie has touched on? You can type in the chat box if you've got a question. You don't want to come on live, but you've got a question, you can put it in the chat box. So, Julie, any final thoughts?
I think my final thought would be to accept kind of where we are without trying to force and figure out and work out, and trust that something will come, because it always does. And it seems as if it may not, and it seems as if a different thing to what you're hoping for might come. But in my experience over the last 6 months, so many things just come along when you trust that feeling, and it can lead to all sorts of wonderful things that you have no idea are possible for you. And just trust it. It doesn't matter what you call it. It doesn't matter whether you fight it because you're happy with calling yourself an atheist, or whatever it is, wherever you think it's coming from, whatever it means to you, just be open to it. Wonderful things can happen.
Brilliant. Thanks so much for sharing your story with us, Julie. And if anyone wants to contact you, how can they do that? Because they might be, I know, I think you're going down the route of potentially sort of working with parents of teenage children. So if anyone listening to this is a parent of teenage children, how would they get in touch with you?
Yeah, I would love to connect with people about that. You can email me. Shall I just type in my email address or pass that on to you so that you can put it in the comments? Or
type it in now, just in case the people on the call want it, and then I'll also obviously add it to the.
I'm on my phone. Can I do that from my phone?
Oh,
I don't want to.
You tell me. Hang on, where's the little cursor?
So it's Ju at Ju Mitchell Coaching. JuMitchellCoaching.co.uk.
MITCHELL.
Yeah.
Then sorry, .com.
Coaching.co.uk.
Oh, Ju Mitchell Coaching.
So Ju at JuMitchellCoaching.co.uk.
Brilliant. Well, we've said it now, but I've put it in the chat box, but I'll make sure that there's a link for the recording as well. Okay, I'll just press unmute for everybody, and we'll say bye-bye. Unmute all. Okay, thank you. Bye, everybody. Bye.
Bye.